Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 92. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another discussion, another journey into a new movie where I break down, give you my pros and cons, talk about what I liked and didn't like about a movie, and then decide at the end whether it is timeless. Is it a movie that I would want to add to my collection and rewatch over and over and over again? Everybody's collection is different. Everybody's got different types of genres, but that's what makes it fun, right? In my opinion, one movie could be timeless, but maybe in your opinion, it might not be. And so that's, again, very fun discussions that we can have. But before we jump into this movie and whether we consider it timeless, I did put up a link up above for episode number 91 where I talk about the film called Piece by Piece. It's actually a music documentary about the life of Pharrell Williams. But what's so cool about it is that it's actually all animated in Lego. Really interesting take and something very unique that you don't see for a type of music documentary. So definitely recommend you guys check out the review. Let me know what you thought about it in that video and whether you consider it timeless. I had a lot of fun watching it. I had a couple of moments that I really just kind of popped out for me that just made me laugh. But again, go ahead and check that one out if you haven't checked it out already. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the new horror movie and sequel to Smile. That is right, we're talking about Smile 2, which is directed and written by Parker Finn. A little bit of background in regards to Smile 2. I actually had not seen the first entry, Smile, that came out in 2022. Wasn't really into horror movies, but I feel like this podcast has helped me kind of expand a little bit in regards to the genres of movies that I end up checking out. So I thought, you know what? Smile 2 is going to come out in theaters. Let me check out the first one. I had a couple of friends tell me that this movie was very well made and actually one of the best horror movies that they'd seen in a while because the story was compelling. And so I went in and I was actually really surprised. I enjoyed the first Smile. And like my friends had mentioned, the story is actually what makes it so interesting. In a lot of different horror movies, you have these, great jump scares, or you have these gory moments. You have all these different types of, creatures that might come out. But you know what's one thing that's very hit or miss is the story of a lot of horror movies. Sometimes they just don't flow. They have a lot of plot holes, or they just don't make sense at all. But this one, in regards to Smile, it all made sense. It followed the therapist just trying to kind of deal with her own trauma, helping other people and their trauma, and then dealing with this psychological entity that just kept, terrorizing and torturing her in various different ways. And so after I checked out Smile, I was thrilled. I was hyped. I was like, okay, I really enjoyed the first one. I can't wait to see the second one just because of the fact that now I get to check it out in theaters. The speakers are going to be loud. The screen is just going to completely take over everything that I'm seeing and hopefully try to, make me flinch and get scared throughout the movie. So went to go check out Smile 2 on opening night with my brother. So let's go ahead and dive into some non-spoiler overall thoughts about Smile 2. Okay, now that I checked it out, I want to say that Smile 2 is a good movie, not a great movie in my opinion. I'll explain a little bit as to why I don't consider it great. But first, I want to start off with some of the good things that I enjoyed. First thing I want to call out is the sound design that they were to pull off in this film. I just called it out a little bit before, but the sound design, especially in Dolby Cinema, they were able to really put on some great sound effects that it got me at one point. In one scene, there was a jump scare that really got me. But it wasn't only the jump scares, it was also the different types of sound effects and the score that made certain scenes feel very ominous, very creepy, very eerie. And so, really appreciated that by the team. Sometimes in different horror movies, you just have loud or very quiet, moments in the film. This one kind of had a nice variation of it, which I appreciated. I also really enjoyed the setting of the movie. In the first film, you actually just follow a therapist going through her day to day as she's trying to battle this entity that's affecting her. In Smile 2, you get the complete opposite. Rather than getting a therapist that's helping people in a certain way, now you have an entertainer. You have a pop star in Sky Riley, played by Naomi Scott. And now you have something completely different. You have a different world where this artist is loved by millions of fans around the world. She's going on a world tour, and at the same time, she's being affected. she's being terrorized by this scary entity that is now taking a hold of her. And so how she kind of deals with that is, very interesting throughout the movie. So again, I really appreciate how drastically different the second film was in regards to who we were following. And then also got to shout out the way that the team had a lot of different transitions and editing throughout the movie. Always really well done when they're able to kind of pull off either one shots or pull off different types of transitions from going to the city and seeing like the landscape and then going into the apartment, or going from the apartment to the concert for Sky Riley. All the different types of editing that was done was something that I definitely wanted to call out in regards to just adding a little bit more to the movie. Now, a couple of things of why I don't think the movie is great is there's a couple of scenes in the movie that just feel very familiar from the first Smile. So I was kind of caught off guard in regards to like, oh, this, I feel like I've seen this before. And then after I went to go watch Smile 2, I was like, yeah, you know what? This kind of came out in Smile. So I was kind of confused why they used very similar beats. And then there was also a couple of moments that were a little slow. I'll get to that in the nitpicks part of the podcast, but just wanted to call that out as to some of the elements as to why I didn't consider it a great or amazing movie as compared to the first Smile. Now, just for your guys' sake, I will give a very quick synopsis about Smile 2, just to kind of give you the general idea as to what took place. Like I mentioned, our main protagonist in this film is Sky Riley, played by Naomi Scott. She is a pop star. At the beginning of the film, it's described that there was an incident where Sky was in a car with her boyfriend, Paul Hudson, and they were using drugs and eventually ended up crashing and having an accident where Paul Hudson, the boyfriend of Sky, ended up passing away. And so now she is trying to get away from drugs. She is sober and she's just trying to get back into her career in order to have a world tour and just focus on just not using any drugs or substances going forward. Everything is going well, but then you see her eventually need some type of a drug to help her with back pains. So instead of using a substance, just for fun or for recreational use, she needs Vicodin in order to help with back pain to kind of get through training and get through the tour that's about to start. So she ends up dealing with one of her drug dealers named Lewis, and this is actually straight from the trailer, but this is where the chain of events kicks off. You have Lewis get a plate because he's already been affected by the entity, and he starts smashing his face over and over again. Sky ends up seeing all of it, and she gets traumatized, and now she has the entity following her, stalking her. And from that moment on, everything starts going downhill. She has these very weird fan interactions. When she trains for the concert, things go wrong. People start thinking that she's crazy, whether it's her manager or her assistant. And as you would expect, everything starts going terribly for the actual protagonist. Now, there is a very cool climax and ending to the movie where you have Sky trying to battle back and get her life back. She does not want to, give in to what the entity wants. And so it's really cool how it all plays out. Not going to spoil it here, but I'll dive into some of those elements that I really enjoyed going forward. But overall, a really fun and cool horror movie. A lot of cool jump scares, and how the film kind of portrays those it catches you off guard a couple of times. Once again, I really enjoyed the aspect of following a famous pop star, and Naomi Scott had a great performance. Still think that they could have done a little bit more to differentiate itself from Smile, but that it could just be a personal opinion on my side. Still enjoy it, and if you enjoyed Smile, I highly recommend you guys go check out Smile 2. It is a great sequel that follows up and just adds a little bit more details to the lore of this universe. So again, definitely recommend you guys check it out. And if you can, check it out in Dolby Cinema or IMAX or wherever you have the theater that has very good speakers, because I think the sound design just really adds so much more to this experience. Okay, those are my non-spoiler thoughts about Smile 2. Before I jump into the spoiler territory, I want to give you guys enough time to jump out if you have not seen the movie. That way you can again watch it, come back, and then hear my pros and cons, and again tell me down in the comments whether you agree or disagree with some of the things that I'll be saying. All right, hopefully that's enough time, but let's go ahead and jump into some spoilers, and let's jump into pro number one, which to me is I really enjoyed the way that this setting of the film takes place around somebody that's famous. Like I mentioned before, this setting is completely different from the first Smile, which is just revolving around the life of a therapist named Rose. Here, you have Sky Riley, who is again, she's trying to start up a world tour. She's trying to make good on appearances, whether it's to different types of sponsors, to underprivileged kids, to different fan interactions, all this different stuff. So you're following her day to day, and I really appreciated it because when you think about somebody famous like in real life, right? And you see them having, going down a downward spiral or something ends up happening, the first thing our brains say is, well, something's going on. Are they on drugs? Are they going crazy? What's going on? And they were able to actually reflect that in this film where you start seeing, the mother of Sky, who is actually her manager, and her assistant thinking like, hey, we're supporting you, but you're acting a little weird. You're acting a little strange. And again, everybody outside looking in thinks that she's on drugs again, when in reality, Sky is just she's being taken over by this entity. And so I really enjoyed that they were able to almost like reflect real life, because us as humans, we're always curious and we're always wondering, well, what's wrong with this person? Like, why did they act like this? Or why were they doing this? And so really enjoyed this setting taking place around this famous person, and having it almost reflect real life, because people will question when somebody starts acting very differently without realizing that something could be really going on in their mind. Not saying that they're being taken over by an entity, but that's kind of how the film tries to portray it, and I really enjoyed it. Also, just kind of seeing a little bit of the behind the scenes of what an artist has to go through, right? Different types of interviews, different types of scenarios where they have to interact with fans and just spend a lot of time just keeping up that type of a character and keeping up that energy, which is nuts. So, really enjoyed how different the setting was for this film as compared to the first Smile. Second pro for me is I really enjoyed the way that they explored an alternative way to try to get rid of the entity. This is the part of the film that I feel like is what made me appreciate like how they were trying to expand more of the lore. In the first film, they explained that the only way that you can kind of get rid of the entity is if you actually kill somebody and murder somebody with somebody witnessing. That way, the witness now becomes the new host for the entity to attach itself to. And so they play around with that idea here in this film, but then they throw out another curveball, which is a nurse named Morris ends up coming in and actually tries to tell Sky, well, I have a plan. I had a brother that was also affected by the entity, and he was taken away and he was killed. And so now I want to do whatever I can to help you get rid of this entity. So he comes up with a plan in regards to try to stop Sky's heart. That way the entity can think that Sky's dead. And then what Morris will do is resuscitate her in order to have her wake up again and not have the entity attached to her. And so I really appreciated that they came up with a very unique type of a plan. Now, knowing that you're going into a horror movie, you know that things never end well for the protagonist in a horror movie. And so you know that the chances of survival are low. But as an audience, when you hear that and you get this proposal of a new plan, it makes you get engaged. It makes you feel like, okay, well, I know that the chances are very low, but I want to see what happens. Can she actually beat the entity in this way? And so, really love that they were able to kind of explore that type of an idea of, hey, here's a theory of how we could potentially go around it. And if there are other Smile movies in this franchise, hopefully they continue to try to expand and give off more and more ideas around the way to get rid of this entity. Now, my next pro in regards to Smile 2 is the transitions. I mentioned this a little bit before in my non spoiler thoughts, but I wanted to just call out the way that this film starts is just so awesome. It kicks off almost right when the first film ends. You're actually following Joel, the police officer that was the ex boyfriend of Rose, and he's trying to get rid of the entity. It's on his sixth day, and what he ends up doing is he tries to actually end up murdering a criminal and have somebody witness. The plan fails because it actually ends up passing on to the drug dealer Lewis, who eventually passes it on to Sky. But that whole opening sequence was just so well edited. It transitions from Joel being outside in the snow to inside a house to then outside the house, all in one shot, or at least it seems like it's one shot. And I really appreciated that. Again, I'm always a sucker for one shots, but they just, whenever they're able to do it so seamlessly, I really enjoyed that piece of it. I also wanted to call out transitions that they were able to pull off when Sky is going from like her concert to her apartment, or her apartment back to the concert, or to different events. I really enjoyed how they were able to kind of seamlessly go in. There's even this one cool transition where you kind of go from the city shot of New York, and then it kind of just zooms into one apartment with the lights on. It ends up being Sky's apartment, where you just kind of just go right through the glass. I really enjoy when teams are able to pull off those types of camera shots in movies, and it just makes me kind of appreciate, like, the effort that it goes to make something a little bit different. So really enjoyed the transitions and editing of Smile 2. Okay, now I want to move into some of my cons in regards to Smile 2. I mentioned that again, I thought the movie was good, but it could have been great. And why I thought that specifically is because my first con calls out that there's a couple of story beats that are very similar to the first Smile. And so I don't know if that was, again, if that was intentional, just to kind of give folks like an idea of like, hey, here's kind of how it connects. But I actually felt like they shouldn't have copied the same types of story beats. I'll give you an example. There's a specific scene where in the first Smile, you have Rose attend a birthday party for her sister's son. He ends up opening one of her gifts, and he finds a dead cat. The cat actually ended up being Rose's cat, but she didn't realize when she was under the influence of the entity that she ended up killing the cat. And so, without even realizing it, she ends up giving that dead cat to her nephew. And it's just an embarrassing moment. And everybody's looking at her. She falls into a glass table. So it was just embarrassing. That same story beat ends up happening in Smile 2. But instead of a birthday party, you have Sky giving a type of a speech. The teleprompter malfunctions. She starts saying all this ridiculous stuff. And then she eventually knocks over an old lady on a table and then everybody's just staring at her. Everybody's like talking under their breath, talking about her. And it's just embarrassing. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know if we needed the very similar story beat like that. I feel like it didn't really add much. Like, I would have much preferred something different in a different type of a setting, but it just added another embarrassing moment to the main protagonist, which I thought was just very similar to the first film. There was also another moment where that felt very similar, in that Sky in this film, she actually ends up trying to get the help of her ex best friend, Gemma. And she calls her, she invites her over to her apartment. She's having a relationship and trying to start all over with her. And then we realize at towards the third act that she ends up, in a car. She's talking to Gemma. They're driving to Staten Island, and she gets a call, and she looks at the call, and it actually says Gemma. And she realizes that the Gemma that she's been dealing with has just been a hallucination, and it's been the entity all along. That same thing happened in Smile. You have Rose, who is getting the help of Joel. She ends up going to Joel's apartment, the police officer, and she thinks that she's talking to Joel, and she feels the support and the love from him. And then she gets a phone call, and it's Joel. And so the same thing happened in this movie. So it kind of rubbed me the wrong way, in that, like, these are just similar story beats and feelings that were shown in the first film. I would have maybe appreciated something very different, that so that we didn't just follow the same kind of trends in regards to the first film. But again, that could just be something personal on my side. Let me know what you guys think about that con down below. Second con that I have is, I felt that the film, especially through the first and some of the second act, felt pretty slow. There was a lot of scenes that just dragged on a little too long, and it kind of just made the film feel very slow. So that was another thing. Again, there's like scenes where you have Sky kind of just like in her apartment, and again, I know that they're trying to set up a specific scare or something very horror filled in that specific scene to kind of give you that feeling of anxiety. But sometimes it just took a little too long. We could have cut a couple of things in regards to those scenes, or just cut a couple of seconds, and I think it still would have had that same impact. But at least for me, it kind of drags a little bit in that first and second act, to kind of, as you're kind of seeing Sky break down scene by scene. But again, those are just some nitpicks that I had on my side. It didn't really take me out of the movie, but it did keep me from making this like a rating of like great or amazing. I think it could have gotten there if it didn't have some of these types of elements, like I mentioned, feeling very slow in certain scenes, or having very similar scenes that we've already seen in the first entry. But enough of the negative stuff. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the favorite things that I enjoyed about Smile 2. Let's start off with the favorite performance. Naomi Scott as Sky. She killed it in this role. She was believable first as a pop star, but as she started breaking down when she got the entity, again, it just the idea of following a pop star, somebody famous, she just played that off really well. Every time she would be in training, and when somebody she thought that somebody tripped her up, but it was actually the entity. She just would go off. She would yell at her mom, yell at her assistant, and everything just felt so authentic. Like she was literally losing her mind as the movie went on. So Naomi Scott killed it. She also was really good at just chugging water bottles. There was this Voss water bottle that was definitely a product placement in the movie, but she chugged like three of those Voss water bottles, and she did it multiple times. And what was so funny is that they actually explained in the movie that that in rehab they actually told her that whenever she has the sense or the feeling of wanting to use a substance, drink an entire glass of water. And she did that multiple times as the entity was trying to torture her mind. But it was a lot of water. I was impressed. I don't know how she did that or how many times it took her, but again, just adding to her performance, everything that she did in this film just was so believable. You could believe that the pain that she was in, the stress that she was feeling, because not only was she able to juggle like the terrors of the entity, she also had to juggle her career. She had to juggle what her mom, her manager was telling her. She had to juggle all these endorsements and sponsors. It was just a lot of pressure, but Naomi Scott was able to kind of portray that in her character. So really well done, and probably one of the better performances of this year as well. Favorite moment for me was the last 20 minutes of this movie. So, although I thought that the first and second act were pretty slow and they dragged a little bit, the last 20 minutes in the third act were just, they were hitting nonstop. You see her hallucinating. You see her thinking that she has the upper hand against the entity as she goes through Morris's plan. And then you get this ending that I don't know how people are going to feel about it. To me, this is probably one of the best endings in a horror movie I've ever seen. And I'll just kind of allude it to, she's at the concert, Sky is, and she's performing in front of all of her fans, and as you would expect, she gets taken over finally by the entity, and she ends up doing something in front of the audience. It just, again, it's just so unique because I've never seen something of a horror movie end like this. Granted, I'm a person that has not seen every horror movie, and horror is not really my genre. So please take my word, for granted if you want to. But I really enjoyed the way that this film ended, and it just kind of sets up so many different questions as to if there is a Smile 3, what the heck is going to happen? How are they going to be able to control this? So again, I don't want to spoil too much of the ending, but I just thought that that last 20-minute section of the film was my favorite part. It kept me in the movie, and it kind of just bumped me up to make this really good. Almost made it a great, but if it wasn't for those cons that I mentioned a little bit before. And then lastly, my favorite shot of the movie is there's a specific scene where Sky is in her apartment. She's hallucinating, and she actually sees her backup dancers in her house. They're all in her closet. And then there's a specific shot where they're all slowly moving in the direction that Sky is. And as soon as she runs, she goes through her hallway with mirrors. And then you have all of the choreographed dancers walking and running at the same time, all as if they were one body, one entity. That shot was so freaking creepy. You couldn't look away. I had to keep looking because it just looks so eerie and so weird and so you were just so curious like that, like it, like how the entity was just able to get these choreographed dancers and have them all walk and run in unison, looking like they were going to about to capture and kill Sky. So it was a really well done shot, and really that whole scene of the choreographed dancers in the apartment was just another top notch item of transitioning and editing as well. So well done to the team. All right, everybody, that's all the pros and cons and favorite moments that I wanted to talk about for Smile 2. Let's get to the ultimate question. Is Smile 2 timeless? For me, in my opinion, Smile 2 is not a timeless movie. Like I mentioned before, there's just a couple scenes that just feel too familiar. And I feel like when a film is using similar beats or similar feelings that you've already seen, it kind of diminishes that movie a little bit, right? Because now you're like, okay, well, if you're just telling me about these similar beats that I've seen before, I'd rather just watch Smile then. And at the moment, I honestly do think that if I had to choose between the two, I actually enjoyed Smile more than Smile 2. Again, I might be in the minority on that one. I've seen a little bit of the discourse so far since the movie came out, and I know a lot of people are loving Smile 2. But to me, Smile just had a lot more of a continuous and just a quicker type of a story. It actually would be one that I would rewatch. For me, again, Smile 2, it has its moments. The performance of Naomi Scott is incredible. And you have all these different types of lore expansion in a way in regards to how they're trying to defeat the entity. But other than that, again, I don't see myself rewatching this, and especially for horror. Once I get through some of the jump scares, I I don't think I'm going to get scared the same way. So it kind of loses its value on that side of it. So to me, Smile 2, although good, and although I do recommend it, not a timeless movie, and not something that I would rewatch in the future. But that's my opinion, guys. What about you? Have you had a chance to check out Smile 2? If you have, let me know down below. What was your favorite moment? What was your favorite scene? Was there a specific moment that you got scared in? Let me know down below. Definitely would want to interact with you guys in the comments. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for those of you that stayed all the way through to listen to this episode and this breakdown. My name is Victor Vasquez. This is episode number 92 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we talk about a new film and decide whether it is timeless. All right, everybody. Appreciate you guys and have a great rest of your week.